All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Well, maybe not good morning where you are, but it is where I am. We are getting ready here to go live for, well, we are live, Friday morning. I've got my words around the wrong way today, not off to a great start. But anyway, we're going to do our live image critique. Right now, I have 20 photographs. Thank you for everyone that submitted those photos yesterday. Very, very quick. I think we had all 20 in about 5 minutes time. So they got uploaded very, very quickly. And what I'm going to do, for those of you who haven't joined me before for a live image critique, is I'm going to go through each of the 20 photographs. I have them open here in Photoshop. I'm going to use my Wacom tablet and my pen. I'm going to draw on them in terms of, where I can see some improvements that might need to be made, or, talk about some different elements as well. And yeah, I'm very excited to see all of the images today. I actually haven't seen them just yet. So Garrett does all of this for me. He downloads those photos and then he, thank you so much. And then he gets them ready for me. And I like to see photographs when I'm critiquing them with fresh eyes. So that way you're going to get my, what I see first and an instant reaction there. So yeah, if you are tuning in, good morning. We've got someone from Argentina watching. Hi everyone, I can see on the screen behind the camera there your comments. If you've got any questions at any time, pop them into the comments. Garrett can read those to me. What I've also got here, because I got a little crafty last night, is I've actually set up a little makeshift kind of posing bag with a little doll, and I've got my light, so I can show you how I'd move and position that. And then I've got my little camera here. How cute is this? This is a USB that I had in my drawer, and I've popped it on a little tripod. So that way it's going to give you a great idea in terms of camera angle and where to position a light and things like that as I sort of go through the images. Because throughout the past image critiques, I tend to kind of mention a lot of things about lighting and camera angles and things like that. So it's going to be great to give you guys a clear visual of what I'm actually talking about here. So alrighty. Oh, it's 3 a.m. You should go back to sleep. This Facebook live video is going to stay in the group. You can come back and watch it when you wake up. So please don't stay awake all night. You'll be exhausted. Okay. Hi everyone. Good morning. Okay, let's get started. You're going to be able to see my screen. There it is. And I've got my Wacom pen here ready to go. I'm just going to change the color of this to red so it's easy for everyone to see what I am doing. And yeah, if that's all right. Thank you. We'll just make sure the lighting and everything is right here. All right, I'm going to get this pen sorted out here. There we go. Okay. Do you know, the first thing I've noticed with this photograph is the color palette of it. It's really quite lovely, and I do really enjoy the green with this beautiful sort of magenta tone that's going on here. The other thing, and I love the prop, it's quite different and unique. The space around the prop in terms of composition might be a little bit too much. You could probably bring that in a little bit if you wanted to, just so the baby doesn't look so small, because right now that little one is really quite little in terms of the size comparison to the rest of the image. There seems to be more background and more prop than there is baby. And yes, I know that could be very well intentional, but we don't want to we don't want to lose the main subject here. So that might be one sort of little area that you could kind of improve there in terms of that composition. The other thing that I'm looking at here is the intensity of light. We seem to have some really quite bright areas on the baby and then some darker shadows. So that light probably needs to be just a little bit softer and not so intense. So you can see here we've got some bright highlights on the little leg, on the back of the hand here, and then onto the chest. So what that's doing there, that direction of light, is creating some contrast there. It's creating a few sort of distracting highlights and shadows, which do take your eye away from that main subject's face. The other thing that I'm looking at is the direction of that light. So you can see that it's coming in from this direction. And if you have a close look here, it's obviously coming straight sort of up. If that little one's head had been back, it would have created a more sort of ghouls effect in terms of that lighting. So just be careful there. But you can see that the little shadow here, the line on from the bottom of the nose is going upwards. So I always try when I'm positioning my light to look where that shadow is falling and have that little shadow coming slightly down. And that means that that light's got to be, you know, slightly elevated, and the head needs to be closest to that light source for that light to be able to fall across the face, creating those downward sort of shadows there. So yeah, try to position, I suppose, the prop and everything in terms of the light a little better there. What I'm also looking at is that the light on the baby is obviously going in this direction, but if we have a look at the prop itself, the shadows tend to be sort of falling down in this area, so that light is coming from that position. So it needs to be a little bit more consistent when you are putting things like this together. I think the use of texture here is quite lovely, and the tones, I suppose, of the prop are really quite different and unique too. So I'm really enjoying that. If you wanted to crop this and you were worried about, say for example, cropping through this little branch here, you could potentially remove that branch. It's not going to impact the overall prop, or you could move it in if you wanted to. So there's a few different ways that you could do that using Photoshop, but I definitely look at removing it and then cropping it. And if we just have a little look here, and we've gone full frame at the moment. So if you did crop it, you probably want to remove a fair bit of that space, hang on, around the outside of the prop, making that baby a little bigger within the entire frame. So that's probably what I'd look at there. And I'd look at probably more of an 8x10 crop as well, something a little bit more square. But when we're cropping our photographs here at the studio, we don't actually choose the ratio until our clients have ordered their products, until we're printing for them. So we keep everything full frame depending on what it is that they're going to order. Alrighty. Okay, well this is a little different. I love the creativity here that's gone into putting this together. She does look like she's really balancing those, the hairstyle there on her head. You can see she's really quite sort of poised and looking quite sort of careful there in terms of balancing them. So that's probably where you may have been able to get her to just to relax just a little bit more. Okay, so the first thing that I'm looking at here is you have shot this from a fairly sort of elevated position, I can see, purely because of the way that her legs are sort of, shortening in terms of perspective there. So possibly coming down a little lower with that camera angle, and that will help lengthen the leg and make that look a little bit longer. The other thing that I'm looking at here is the belly, where it's sort of, joining the background there. You are sort of losing that line. When you zoom in, you can sort of see it there, but you are starting to lose that line of the belly on that background. So a little bit of separation there in terms of lighting would really help this. The other thing is when we're looking at composition and where you place your subject within the frame, sort of at the moment she's sort of centered but slightly off center. So when we have a look at the crop, you can see she's, like I said, sort of slightly off-centered there and not quite straight. So sort of straightening her up and bringing her into the middle of the frame would actually really benefit this particular image. It would give it more impact and really bring your eye into that subject. But yeah, I really think you've done something different and unique here, and I love it. I would love to see you continue to explore this kind of concept. But yeah, coming down with a slightly different perspective there in terms of that camera angle, and you'll lengthen those legs and Going for something a little bit more dramatic in terms of your lighting would really benefit this as well, just to kind of define the shape of the body a bit more and create some separation between your subject and the background, because that background is very, very flat, but I can see that you've gone with something that is nice and high key and bright. So yeah, I'd probably bring her sort of a little bit further forward from that background. I can see that there's a bit of a shadow down here, so it is, you know, quite flat lit because of that really soft shadow there. So I'd probably have that light a little bit further, you know, off to the side here. So that shadow kind of comes off in this direction and then light it in that sense, and then use a reflector to kind of fill in some of the shadows over here. But you do want to create a little bit of separation with your lighting there from the background so you can see everything. The other thing that's kind of catching my eye here is just this seam on the bodysuit. When you go to all the trouble of, you know, getting everything else right, fixing up this sort of seam and removing that would really benefit here. And then having a look at the little sort of line here coming off her bum, I'd probably kind of smooth that out a bit more and liquefy. You can see the line here coming down, and then it sort of comes down and then comes in and then goes out that way. So I would just bring that into liquefy and smooth that out a little bit more as well. But yeah, with this line here on the outfit, you could use your patch tool to come in and remove that line. And then that would be a little less distracting, and that's just very quick. All right, so yeah, just showing you the difference there. Alrighty, cool hairdo, I like that. I love different things.
We've got 100 people joining us so far.
Oh wow, good morning everyone, hi. Don't forget to pop your questions if you have any into the comments. Garrett will ask those to me. But I do appreciate you guys joining me wherever you are, or from all over the world I can see by the looks of it. Okay, oh, another maternity. Alrighty, I'm really enjoying her expression here. You can see, you know, it's a very relaxed, it's a very genuine smile. She looks, you know, very, very happy and content, which is lovely. The tilt of the head, though, is probably just that little bit too far forward, just kind of bringing that head up a little higher. You can still have them looking down. So when I'm posing my maternity clients, I kind of have them just turn their head slightly and then just look down gently. And then I'll sort of direct them and go continue, chin up, chin down, a little bit more to the left and things like that. So just continually working with them to get that head in the perfect position. One thing that I'm noticing here is, and then the outfit is really beautiful, is the background is quite distracting. You know, you've got this quite sort of strong depth of field going on here, so everything's very out of focus, which does create separation between her and the background, but there is a lot going on there, so you've got quite a few sort of different lines and colours and patterns, and they're all sort of competing for the colours and the design of her outfit. So probably, you know, just continually looking around behind you to try and find a little bit more of a, you know, a cleaner background and possibly you know, a different sort of angle as well. The other thing that I'm looking at here in terms of the posing is the positioning of the hands. So down here we've lost a few fingers and then we can't see all of the fingers here. So perhaps, you know, if you were to kind of come around a little more, keep moving your body, you can get them to turn, but when you've got them, you know, in a pose, you don't really want them continually moving. So when you've got it all set up, so if you continue to move to see all of the different elements, you'll be able to get a much better angle. So if you'd come further around this way, you know, you would have been able to see the fingers over here and the fingers here as well. The exposure looks good. Just having a little look here around the edges. When you are working with really quite bright tones like this, just be careful with the the saturation of those and pushing those tones outside their colour gamut, because when you go to print them, they won't always print exactly the same way that you're looking at them on your screen. So yeah, possibly just bringing back a little bit more of that saturation would help this. Yeah, but that's pretty much it. I quite like the crop of this in terms of having her, you know, quite large within the frame. It works really well for this. We're getting through these today. Alrighty. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. I'm just looking at this little baby. These heart bowls, you know, they're such a great prop, and they are quite difficult to position a baby in them because of the shape. So I think you've done a good job here of getting that head up into that top sort of right curve there, but just be careful when you are posing and positioning them in a prop like this. You know, when you're sort of coming in, you're not following the lines of the actual prop. So probably would have had the bottom down here, had the baby body there, and then the head up there as well, just to follow, you know, these sort of lines of the prop. And that's usually what I look for when I am positioning a baby inside something like this. But you know, when you've got that body sort of coming straight down here and connecting with the edge of the prop, it doesn't really sit well inside the actual bowl itself. The other thing I'm kind of looking at here is there is a lot of different elements. We've got a really textured background. So we've got different areas like this in terms of the wooden floor. We've got some lines, and then we've got all of this fabric around the outside of the bowl, which is softening, obviously, the connection between the prop and the floor, but it doesn't really add to the actual image. I probably would have preferred, you know, for myself personally, if you remove the background and just have that, you could extend that floor a little bit more. But if you just had the prop and that material, you would remove a lot of other distracting elements within the frame. So you could extend it up here and down here as well. The other thing is the way that the light is falling off into the bottom half of this frame. That's a little too contrasty. So you've got quite a large area of very bright white information up here, and then down the bottom it's sort of very dull and grey and flat. So just positioning your light a little better will help with that. If you are using natural light, you're probably just going to have to get a reflector and put it down here to bounce some light back into those shadows. And the same thing if you're using a artificial light source, just possibly lifting that light up a little better. And what I mean by that is, let's go over here to my little lighting diagram. Garrett, I'm going to show this one. So if this was your prop, then what I would probably do is have that light, you know, nice and elevated there, but instead of pointing it down towards your prop, I would just kind of tilt it up a little higher, and then you're going to get the light sort of spilling further across the top of your prop and baby, as opposed to kind of coming down and then hitting the ground. So yeah, just kind of lift it up, tilt it up a little bit more, so you get that beautiful spill of light falling across the top of your subject there. Okay, now if we have a little look as well, I was talking about the different elements that are in the image. You know, we've got some flowers over here, we've got the pink texture here, we've got the background here, we've got texture in the background here, and then we've got, you know, the tassel and things like that. I can see that you've put a lot of time into setting this up, but sometimes when we add too many different elements, the images become quite sort of busy and distracting and take your eye away from that main subject. So I probably, you know, would go with setting it up and then take a shot, have a look at it, and then start to remove different elements from it to get it all exactly where you want. And try to continue, instead of using your tassel like this, how it's created this line like that, I would probably look at you know, following the shape of the prop and the baby, so that line from that tassel draws your eye around the subject a little better. Alrighty, now when we have a look at the wrapping, I did a little live wrapping demonstration the other day actually, and I talked a little bit about the way that you do position the wrap around the outside of the baby. If you make that too firm, too tight, you draw the legs in, and then this is why they don't sit flat, the little feet. So what you want to do is kind of not pull it too tight so that the legs can kind of come out a little wider and then bend in. So if the fabric is too stretchy, too tight, it's not about, you know, trying to get it as tight as you possibly can. It's being able to position it in a way so that the little hips can sit out a little wider so you can get those knees out for the feet to sit flat, if that makes sense. But yeah, keep going with that. You know, you've spent a lot of time obviously perfecting all of the details there, so just a few little you know, suggestions and things that you can improve on, and this would have been absolutely, you know, stunning. Alrighty. So first thing that I noticed when I opened this is this very, very soft edge all the way around the outside here. So it doesn't really match the contrast, you know, in the center of the frame. So when we are blurring the edges, just be careful that we're not overdoing it in a way that it creates that hazy sort of effect that's not consistent throughout the entire frame. I'm enjoying the colors and you know what you've put together here. So just be careful with that that blurring of the edge there that will create that sort of hazy effect. When we shoot from above, it can be really tricky to get that perspective just right. So you've got to try and get as square on as you possibly can above that baby, because at the moment with the angle, you know, it sort of looks like it's sloping downwards. So this edge is, you know, higher and closer to the frame because you weren't completely straight on there to the setup, the prop, and so forth. The other thing I'm looking at here is the headband it matches the obviously the wrap, and then obviously some of these purpley tones down here, and there's flowers in there. But if you have a little look, and this is me being particular, but that's what I'm continually looking at when I'm creating my setups and how I style them, is that you've got some flowers down here in the background. Now the colors and tones with those match perfectly with the woven, I suppose it's a mat, I'm guessing. It's like a little blanket, a little woven blanket in the background, and then the wooden prop. And then you've also got the little yellows as well in there that are matching some of the tones in those flowers too. So this headband here, it doesn't match those flowers up there. So sometimes less is more, and you know, it may have been better to have not had the headband in the shot, as it is quite a big headband and it is a little bit distracting. So I would have gone with one or the other in terms of this. So, you know, either remove the flowers in the background or remove the headband. So it's one or the other. The other thing I'm kind of looking at here in terms of the wrap is, I can see you've put the wrap over the baby's nappy, which has worked really well here. But we have a large area of skin in here that is visible. So when we are positioning a baby, and Garrett, where have I put my doll, Crystal, from yesterday? Alrighty, thank you. When you're positioning a baby inside a prop like this, if they're flat, you're obviously laying on a flat surface, you're obviously going to see you know, more of their belly. So, but if you can get them into a nice sort of well and create a well within inside the prop, you can curl them up so you can create you know, a more rounded look as opposed to a baby laying flat. So you want to try and create some supports underneath the baby's head and underneath the bottom to create that sort of rounded well. When I'm working on my posing bag, you know, I create that well in the posing bag, and I place my supports obviously around the baby to keep it nice and curled up. So it's the same when I'm working with props. I just try to create the same sort of you know, rounded shape underneath the baby to help keep them in position. And that would have brought those little legs up a little higher and covered a lot of that sort of open area there, that skin on the belly. The other thing I'm kind of looking at here is just the intensity of light. It is a little bright. So you've got a very bright side to the baby, and then you've got, you know, some sort of darker shadows going on over here as well. So just repositioning that light because it seems to be coming in quite low there. So, and it's what's creating some of these sort of harsher shadows. So what you need to do is lift that light up a little higher, like what we've got over here. So what I can see at the moment is, if this is our baby laying on the bed, that light is quite low coming in like that. So what you need to do is get that light up a little higher and then tilt it up just a bit. If you're using a nice big softbox to create beautiful soft light, get it up a little higher and then tilt it up so you get the beautiful soft spill light that's going to come off the edge of that softbox, and then it's going to spread further across your baby and soften some of those shadows. I mean, we do love shadows, but we don't want the contrast between the highlights and shadows to be so great that it becomes distracting. So the other thing, and this would have also, you know, really helped as well down here. You can see where it is quite bright hitting the edge of that wrap as well. So yeah, and if you do end up with some shadows, just pop a little reflector in and you can, you know, fill some of those darker areas. Skin tones look great. All right, got any questions? Not yet?
Nothing coming through yet, no. What image are we up to? What number? About 5 in?
I think I've done 4.
4 or 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, not too far in, so you haven't missed too much.
Ah,
But you
fantastic.
can come back and watch it at any time.
Somebody's just commented on my little setup here. I got crafty.
It is the best demonstration in the world. It's beautiful.
Look at it. Anyway,
We'll make a stop motion cartoon out of it. Back to work.
okay. So, I mean, look at the smile on this baby's face. Too cute. When we talk about creating that well and that curl around the baby, you can see that, you know, the baby's got a nice sort of rounded shape around them, which looks great in terms of that position. Okay, let me get rid of that red line. When you are working with whites, it can be tricky, you know, trying to get the tones and everything absolutely perfect. I can sort of see there's some bright highlights in the background there on white. It can be hard to avoid those, but when you get that lighting just right, you can, you know, perfect that a little better. So I can actually see that the light coming in looks a little low here. So what I would have done again is lift that light up. Oh, and going back to the previous the previous image where I said that light was a little low, if you're shooting with natural light, just if the window hits the ground, just block off the bottom of the window. Like put, I've got polystyrene that I put across the bottom of my windows, and you can, you know, use anything. But if you block a little bit of that light from down below, and then that way the light just coming in from above will work the same way as how I was explaining it with the softbox. Alrighty. I'm enjoying the placement of the arm, actually, how it's coming around and it's following that round shape of the baby. So the placement is really, really good. The other thing here, what I was explaining in the previous one, is when that light does come in quite low, you know, it is going to make the area that is closest to that light source very, very bright. So just lift that light up a little higher and you'll find that it will spread a little more and soften some of those shadows there. When I'm having a look at, you know, images that have been shot on white and things like that, it is very hard to get the skin tones perfect when you are exposing for the white in your blankets and wraps. And I can see that the skin here has been lifted. There are some grey tones in the skin. We've got some sort of cooler grey tones here and down here, and then we've kind of got a little bit of pink cheek going on, but the skin tones themselves look quite sort of grey and flat. So you do have to be careful when you're lifting the exposure in your skin tones and you're removing a lot of reds, you will make those tones look quite grey and flat. So try not to remove all of the red tones. And when you are doing that, mask it so that you're only painting on those layers where you need them to be, not over the entire baby, because even the lips seem to have lost a little bit of the pinky colour tone that they should have. All right. In terms of composition, when we go for that bullseye composition, and what do we got here? We got an 8:10-ish type ratio going on. Just in terms of positioning, what I'm always looking for is to make sure that that baby is completely in the center, so that at the moment you can see we're sort of just a little bit off-centered. Obviously the baby's face is, but I'm looking at from this side to this side, the whole sort of circular shape there. So try to get them a little bit more centered within that frame. When we are cropping our images, try to kind of stick to those ratios as well.
I was about to ask you that same question. Do you always stick to the set ones in Photoshop?
Yes. Yeah. Alrighty. But yeah, I'm enjoying the pose and the way that the baby's supported, and great job catching that little smile.
Michelle Ken has made a comment. She can't decide whether your mini posing bag looks like a quiche or a cake, but either way it's making her hungry.
Nice.
Yep. And can you please get out of the way saying hello to your mother? She's here.
Good morning. I'll talk to you later. Okay. Right. Look at that baby's face. Do you know, first thing, wrapping, really beautiful wrapping. The crop is probably just a little bit too tight, coming down a little too low there in terms of the brow. Whenever I crop through the top of a baby's head, I always make sure that I'm not cropping so much through their forehead. It's more about the hairline that I'm cropping through. So try not to come in too tight. Because it just seems a little bit constrained there at the top part of the image. The other thing, and then obviously with that little toe kind of hitting the edge of the frame there as well. The skin tones, they look nice and warm. There's a couple of little cooler tones in here as well, just on the foot and then sort of around the eyes there, so kind of warming them up to match those beautiful warm tones that are in the skin. The light coming in, when you are doing these backlit shots, we do have to be careful that we don't overexpose, a lot of those highlights where the light is hitting them, where it falls across the baby. So if we have a look at our histogram, we can see that we are, so close to the edge of that histogram that we're going to start to lose detail. And if I just take it into curves here, and if I hold the Option key in and I move my white slider, now you can start to see where you've lost information there in the skin tones. So it's in the little face and the hands, you can see as I move that slider. So now that's right at the very end there. So you can see that there's a little bit of loss of detail around the tops of the fingers and on that cheek there. So try to watch that exposure. If you've got to bring that exposure down in terms of, letting less light into your camera, you may obviously then darken some of those shadows that are going to be over here and this side of the baby. So you may just have to introduce some fill in terms of a reflector just to soften those shadows, and that's going to be much better in terms of your exposure and getting those skin tones perfect as well. So yeah, a few little highlights kind of going on over here, but it just makes this area quite sort of busy and overexposed.
When it comes to printing something like that, if you were to print that,
it won't print anything. There's no information there to print, so it would just be white paper. That's basically what it would be. And at the end of the day, we're photographers and we should be printing all of our photographs for our clients, because we are running the risk of becoming a printless society, you know, for our future generations, and that would be really, really sad for people not to have photographs to show, you know, their family history and so forth. So always keep that print in mind. Great comment, Garrett. Yeah, but again, colours, you know, the wrap is perfectly matched here with the background and the skin tones. So that's been done really, really well. Just be careful of that really tight crop and those highlights.
There's a comment here, super nice little model on your desk there. That's the best demonstration ever seen about lighting. You have a special talent to imagine how to make people understand and immortalise important tips in their mind.
Aww.
You have my admiration.
Thank
I'll
you.
show everyone again what it looks like. There we go.
All right, check out the camera. You know, when you're getting that perfect camera angle and you're getting that lighting just right. I'm very impressed myself.
It's crafting.
I do love to craft, people. All right, let's get back to our images.
There we go.
Okay. In terms of a black and white, you know, we've got highlights, we've got shadows, we've got grey tones. So you've done, you know, really well there in creating a wonderfully contrasty black and white image. I'm kind of looking at it though, going, what is this adding to the image? So I'm not quite understanding exactly what the line there is really sort of doing. And that's one thing that we really do have to understand when we create our photographs, how they're going to make somebody, you know, feel, what they're going to look and see, because we all see differently. What we create in our photographs with intention may not be as clear to somebody else when they're looking at your photographs. So always remember that. The other thing that I'm looking at here is the baby looks quite flat. So if we take our baby doll over here and pop her into a bit of a similar position, you know, when you have got them positioned like that, you know, it is quite flat. So if I curl her head up and then turn it, you create a bit more of a rounded shape. So a little bit more support around the back of the baby's head in this instance would make it look less flat. So it does kind of look like that chest is sort of coming up there. So, you know, try to create that nice sort of round, curved well underneath the baby to position it a little better for something like this. So bringing that chin forward would eliminate sort of areas like this that you know, you don't need to see as well. So yeah. The other thing that could potentially benefit this is if you removed the what do you call it, the wrap in the background there, and I'll just do this very, very quickly. All right. So now, if you change the perspective of this and put that baby in the middle, you know, you've got a very different image. So think about, you know, the way that you look at a photograph and the way that you want the viewer's eye to move through the image in terms of that composition and perspective. The wrapping itself, you know, I think you've done a great job, just a little bit more consistency in terms of how you position it around the outside. And when you are working with sort of, you know, that high contrasting light like you have here, just be careful that you don't sort of lose the edges down here where the shadows kind of start to take over. And when we are working with, you know, these sort of darker tones, if you come in here, you can sort of see around the edge of the baby's head there, it's not as dark as what it is elsewhere. So I'll just show you in curves. Again, I'm going to hold that option key in. Actually, let's make the image a bit smaller. So if you have a look around, I'll make it all black, and then as I bring it back, you can see the information around the outside of the baby is not as dark as the rest of that background. So just try to be a little bit more careful there, because if you did print that, that shift in tone could be very, very noticeable in print. Alrighty. Yeah, but I mean, I'm a big fan of those beautiful contrasty black and whites.
Somebody's asked here, Andrea, when you aren't able to lift the light up because you have low ceilings and a big umbrella, what are your suggestions to soften the light and reduce those shadows and not have harsh highlights?
Do you know, that is, yeah, that is a good question, because I know, like we have a standard size ceiling here at the studio. I love shooting in my big space where the ceiling's very, very high, but you know, down here I've got to be careful of that exact same thing. So you're probably just going to have to look at potentially diffusing that light just a little bit more, possibly turning the output down if you can, and positioning that light for probably further back as well. But if you can angle it in a way, like when we're sort of in the, you know, positioning our lights, I suppose, if you can get it as high as you possibly can towards that ceiling, you know, tilting it up as high as obviously you can. But yeah, I would probably, you know, get it up as high as you can, and if you do need to point it down directly at the subject instead of feathering it, then possibly reducing the output so it's not so intense. And then perhaps using some more sort of reflectors on the other side to help bring some of that light back into those darker shadowy areas.
I suppose with so many variables on that one, it's probably best to play
Yeah.
and just continuously try.
And that's the thing, you know, all the different lights that are out there and the different modifiers, if I'm not physically standing in your space, it's going to be really hard to actually kind of go, right, you need to do this, this and this. So as Garrett said, you know, what I do here is just play. Like in the moment we've got 2 continuous LED lights pointed directly at the ceiling, you know, coming down on me. So I'm getting, you know, I'm using the light to kind of, you know, feather and filter it off, which is working, you know, perfectly. Bouncing light works too, like what I'm saying in terms of bouncing it off the ceiling. Yeah, and it also depends on the setup and the prop. Alrighty, back to our images. I'm getting carried away. Look at this sweet baby. The posing here is lovely. The baby looks really comfortable. You can see all of that beautiful face. Possibly could be a crop. I mean, it could be sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe not cropped as tightly. So when you are sort of cropping those images in post-production, you know, try not to kind of eliminate too much space from around that baby, so you give it some room to breathe. But you know, it is balanced obviously, and it looks really comfortable. The other thing when I am doing this particular pose is I will try to get that chin up as high as I possibly can, so pointing in this direction, and then sort of move my body further around so I see less of this kind of area. Even though the baby's got a little outfit on and it's very cute, if the baby, you know, I suppose what it would do is just remove some of those sort of darker, sort of more shadowy areas down here. Another thing to kind of keep in mind is when you are positioning your supports and things like that underneath your blankets, you know, if you don't have a firm layer across the top of your posing bag, you know, or you don't pull those blankets firm enough, you will get, you know, sort of these lumps and bumps around the baby, so be careful with those. The other thing you can do is, you know, where it's a little darker in these areas, lighten those, and you could potentially darken down some of the brighter areas to make it look a little bit more consistent and smoother. What else are we looking at here? There is a little bit of a bright highlight. The brightest part of the image is just that headband where that light is coming in and hitting it there, so be careful with that. The light does look like it is quite low here. In terms of where it is coming in. I mean, the overall lighting, it's, you know, it is lovely. You've got, you know, a beautifully lit baby, but what's happening here is with that light coming in too low, the background is actually brighter than the foreground. So lift that light a little higher. So what I'm talking about is, your light at the moment is coming in a little too low, and it's pointing at the back of the background and it's lighting that, it's catching all of that light where that blanket's come up. So get that light up a little higher and point it sort of, you know, down, and then potentially feather it so you're getting all of this beautiful spill light coming across the baby. So directing that light a little better is going to help here. All right, but yeah, that baby's face is absolutely gorgeous, and that outfit's really cute too. It is tricky when you're photographing, you know, whites, because what you want to do is obviously expose for those details. So yeah, try to be careful there when you are controlling that light to get it nice and even and consistent across your whites. Alrighty, oh, this little one. Okay, so again, the first thing I'm kind of noticing here is how low the light is coming in. If it's a natural window, like natural light coming through a window, you know, try to block a little bit of that light that's coming in low, and then that way you're just going to get that light coming in from above falling across the baby. It will be softer, so you will have to adjust your camera settings, but it is going to give you a much more even light across the baby. Because if we have a look, we've got, you know, a very bright area here, and then we've got some bright areas here, but you know, it's sort of flatter and darker there, falling off into the background. And this being raised with the supports, it's catching that light as it comes in from that low angle. You know, I think the baby looks really comfortable. It is a tricky pose to put babies in. You know, if you can't get them as curled up as you want to, but try to get that knee and elbow connected there with this particular pose. The face is, you know, sitting there on that little hand. One tip I always recommend when we are doing this particular pose is, if you see the baby's face at the moment and where the wrist is, the fingers are kind of getting lost in there underneath that cheek. And that's because of the angle of the wrist. So instead of having, you know, the wrist bent that way, I always try to bend the wrist that way. So that way, when you pull it in underneath the face, the fingers are going to come out. So, and then that you don't end up with, you know, that sort of large area there, and then the fingers disappearing underneath the face. And I know some babies are tricky to get those little hands out, but I would have got my safe shot and then sort of come in and adjusted that wrist and brought those little fingers out. I can see here the support where it's come up here underneath the little baby's legs. When you are doing this particular pose, try not to put your supports in until you've got that baby in position, and then probably with this setup, I would probably have my supports further back here and not so far up underneath those little shins, and that's going to get you, you know, to get that bottom up a little higher and create that nice curl. You know, I like the way that the wrap is kind of placed around the baby, but when you have lines that hit the edge of the frame, it will just naturally draw your eye to that area as a leading line, so try to be careful with that. Try to keep everything within the frame. The background looks lovely and smooth over here, but then you've got the wrap kind of coming up and creating a little bit of a, you know, I suppose, yeah, like a distracting element there in that background. The other thing with the headband is headbands should be up in the hair, coming around this way, as opposed to sort of going straight through the top of the baby's head. So just try to get that headband down and then pull it up a little higher. When you cut through the forehead like that, it can be, again, like quite a distracting element. So try to put it up into that hairline, and it'll help frame the face as opposed to, you know, separating the top of the head from that little face. And everything should basically, you know, work with the shape that you're trying to create and frame it. And then, yeah, it'll make a big difference. The other thing that I just wanted to touch on very quickly with this little one is just these cooler tones that are in the baby's face over here. So if we come, let's go into hue and saturation. Now, if we click on these cooler tones, you can see, you know, how pink pink they sort of are there. And then obviously they're warming up and moving up into those warmer tones there. But around the eyes and the top of that mouth, they're just that little bit too cool. So try to even out those skin tones. All right. The blue tones here are beautiful. I love these sort of muted-y grey blues. You know, this is quite the sort of a good example of, you know, when less is best and it's just the baby, because that's what you're looking at. Even though we have got a wrap here, I can see that you've used that to try and create a little bit of a detail, which is quite nice. The one thing that is sort of slightly off is the balance of the frame and the positioning of the baby within inside the actual image. If we have a look over here, and we'll bring up our rule of thirds. You know, I do like to use these intersecting lines as points of interest within my frame. When we look at photographs, when we look at art, we like, you know, we want to be taken on a bit of a journey, I suppose, through the frame, and you want to use the different elements to help position, you know, the subject's eye. So, I mean, sorry, the viewer's eye. So when I'm looking at something like this, yes, we do read naturally from left to right, and the wrap sort of starts here and brings you down into the baby, but we're quite close to the bottom of that frame, which does lead you out. It doesn't keep you in the frame. So if you have a look, and I'm going to try something here and see if it works. If you were to flip this and then potentially kind of bring that baby up a little higher so it wasn't so close to the edge of the frame. Now if we have a look at our, let's get rid of that layer. Now if we have a look at our rule of thirds, you know, we could position the baby's head, you know, at that intersecting line, and then have the body sort of lead you into that negative space. And that could work really well for you as well. The other thing that I'm always looking to do is to try to have the baby's face pointing towards that negative space within the frame, so it does lead you through there. But yeah, that's just a couple of ideas that you could potentially use there, but try not to have them too close to the bottom of that frame. One thing that I'm kind of seeing a little bit here in the frame is some banding, and I know this is not a large sized file, but yeah, just be careful when you are painting your backgrounds or adding any blur. You can start to see the banding coming through here. Be careful of that, because when you do go to print an image that has got banding in there, it will be quite noticeable. Coming back to the actual capture, when we look at the camera angle, just come up a little higher, further around above the baby if you can, so that you eliminate a lot of this space down here. So for me, this particular camera angle with this particular pose, I probably would have been around here and slightly lower, you know, and then having the body disappear into the background. That could have worked really well for a camera angle for this particular setup. When you shoot directly from above, if you don't get that baby, you know, in that nice round curled up shape, you will sort of start to see larger surface areas here on the tummy and the chest that will compete for that baby's face, because they're often, you know, very flat, obviously areas. There's not a lot of detail like you do have in the face with the nose and the lips and cheeks and things like that. So when the light hits it, it becomes, you know, sort of quite a large area of nothing almost that can be quite flatly lit. So they do sort of tend to draw your eye there, and you can see that the little one's face is just that bit darker than the leg area and a little bit of that belly, so try to be careful with that. You know, tucking in a bit of the wrap as well would work for you. You could liquefy just some of these little areas around here to kind of make it look a bit rounder and curlier. That would definitely help too. But skin tones look, you know, lovely in the face, really nice and warm. And the colour palette's beautiful. All right. Look at that baby's face. You know, I like that you've not overdone the skin, and you can see a lot of texture in there. You know, I think often we get a little carried away when we're editing baby skin, and we tend to make them look a bit too soft. So, you know, great job with the texture there. That's been done really well. I'm a big fan of using props to create a frame within a frame around the baby. I think that's been done really well here. You've got that baby positioned, you know, perfectly inside that prop. The one thing that is a little bit distracting is just how bright the wool is down here around the baby. I probably would have had that a bit darker. You've got a dark background, and then you've got a dark wrap, but then you've got, you know, this really quite sort of bright area in here behind the baby. It is brighter than the box. So, and it's not consistently lit with some sort of, you know, darker areas down here and then some brighter highlights up there. So they do take your eye away from, you know, they lead you away from that little baby. So be careful with those. You can potentially tone them down. I can see that there's still detail in them, but they are the brightest part of the image. The other thing is the perspective is just slightly off here with camera angle. When we're trying to go for something that's, you know, square like this, and we're lining it up with the edge of the frame, just be careful, because you can see that it's kind of tilting downward there a little bit, and you can see this edge is a little bit higher. So trying to get that balance off, sort of a bit more centered there. Can't really sort of say anything else really. The wrapping is done really, really well. Just be careful of those finger placements. You know, we've kind of got 2 fingers and then half a finger, and then we've got one sort of bent finger and some knuckles going on. So try to make those a little tidier. Get your safe shot, come back in, and then just reposition those fingers if you can. I always find that when I get my safe shot, you know, when I stop touching the baby for a little while, it allows them to kind of relax just a bit, so you can get those fingers just perfect when you come back in. There's another little, and I'm being super picky, but yeah, just that little area there, just tone that down, and I mean, it's easy to do, you know, with a paintbrush, changing the mode. Okay, skin tones look really good. Have a quick drink of water. Any questions?
No questions coming through just yet. Lots of people loving your little setup there. Question about your Wacom.
Yes.
It was back up here. Mike chimed in and helped out with this one too. I edit using a mouse. Do you find it easier with a pen, or do you feel the difference is slight and doesn't really make much of a difference? You've got an opinion on this one.
Oh yeah, and I haven't edited with a mouse in so long. It would feel very foreign to me, but I'm so used to using my pen, and it's so quick when it comes to, you know, retouching skin and things like that. But yeah, I mean, if you naturally like to draw, this would be perfect for you. I do know a lot of people who have tried a Wacom and it hasn't sort of come naturally to them, so they've gone back to obviously using a mouse. But if you stick with it, you eventually will just absolutely love it. Michelle and I probably use ours the same way. We don't really use the buttons or the keys on the tablet itself. We tend to use all of the shortcut keys on our keyboards, and then just using the tablet itself to draw, I suppose, so you say it, and then obviously our little buttons on the side here to right click and so forth. But yeah, it is, I can't live without mine, and I'm so cranky with myself because I put it in my handbag the other day, and I've put something on top of it and I've scratched it quite badly, and I thought that I wouldn't be able to use it, but it's not bothering me so far. But yeah, don't throw them in your handbag with keys. But yeah, honestly, I can't live without mine, and I absolutely love it. So the only time I get frustrated is when I'm on a plane, and I spend a lot of time on planes. I want to edit, and there's nowhere wide enough for me to put both my computer and tablet. So smaller ones are great for travel, and the new Wacoms that have the actual image on the tablet itself, they're quite amazing, and they're great as well to travel with and edit on. I've not ventured down that path just yet in terms of investment, so I'll be definitely looking at that, I think, later on this year. But yeah, it is a game changer was a game changer for me. Alrighty. Oh, we've had quite a few images with blue tones today. It
Yeah.
looks lovely. You know, looking at,
Matching your top.
yes, oh, yes. The wrapping here is done really well. It's really neat and tidy and perfect. You can see that this is a very small baby. Look at that little finger coming up there, which is quite sweet. The one thing I would have done here is obviously grabbed my shot, and then I would have come back in and just readjusted those fingers and tried to get that hand out to cup the face, because at the moment it's just one little finger. Whilst it's cute and I'm sure the parents absolutely love it, for me, I love to get everything absolutely perfect. And you know, you've got that wrapping down packed, just getting those little fingers nice and curled up. And one thing I am noticing with this setup is just it's quite flat. So there is a little bit of curve obviously here, but if you could have put some more supports, you know, in here underneath that little baby's head and just curled that little head up a little bit, it wouldn't look so flat, and you could have, you know, got that hand a little higher. So at the moment where the face is quite flat, if you tilt that head up a bit higher, you could have put that chin into the little palm of the hand, which would have worked perfectly. The other thing in terms of lighting, it is just a little, it's a little intense. We've got, you know, quite dark sort of shadows coming over here. So, and I know when you are photographing darker tones like this, it can be a little tricky, obviously, you know, to get those shadows just perfect, but just down in here where it is quite dark as well, just sort of reposition that light and get it up. At the moment you can see the shadows, so the light's probably coming up a little too high, so you can see the shadows coming down here. So what you do want is that light sort of around a little more towards the front of the bag. We'll come over here to our lighting demonstration. So if we have a look at the position here of the baby on the posing bag, it looks like that light is sort of coming down the top of the baby's head, sort of in this direction. And that's why you can see, you know, these sort of darker shadows down here. So what I would recommend is sort of bringing that light more around on a 45-degree angle towards the front of that baby, and having it, you know, angled a little bit more across the front as opposed to the back. So what I can see here is that this part of the wrap, which is further away from the camera, is brighter than the front part. So you want to bring that light around and then sort of have it falling across the baby in this direction as opposed to this direction, if that makes sense. Yeah, great colours, the skin tones look lovely, but by doing that, you're going to reduce, you know, the shadows that are falling here underneath the baby's eyes, making those dark, and you're going to spread that light a little bit further so it'll fall across the chin, lighting it a bit better too. Babies in here, I just adore it. Alrighty, so this is another example of using a prop and framing within a frame. So I think you've done a great job of getting that frame, you know, sort of nice and centered there, and positioning this in a way that you've, you know, that baby is in the middle of the frame. I think you've done a great job there. One thing to be very careful of again is just those really bright highlights there in that wrap. You can see the histogram is, you know, right up there. The information is right up there against the edge of that histogram. So you have got some overexposed highlights there, which means you are not going to be able to print any information there. Again, if we have a quick look, you'll be able to see exactly which area, and that wrap down here is losing some detail information, and the those highlights there in that white area. Okay, so when I am shooting on my camera, and I've talked a little bit about exposure in quite a few images, it's really important that you have that histogram up on the back of your camera and you're watching the exposure in terms of that information and how you're recording it. it's very hard to look at the back of your camera and just the picture, the actual photograph that you've taken, to see if that exposure is right. That LCD screen is not going to give you an accurate representation of your exposure. It's the information in your histogram that's going to tell you whether or not you've overexposed it or underexposed it, and where all of that information, sits within that file. So get that histogram up on the back of your camera when you are shooting with it. Get into the habit of relying on it every time you click that shutter, so that you can see exactly, where that exposure sits. Alrighty. In terms of the styling here, I think you've done a great job with your pinks and things like that. The little bit of pink wrap down here is probably doesn't need to be there. It's a bit distracting. And with the way that, in terms of styling, I think you've done a great job in terms of colours. Just be careful with the placement of things, because the white edge of this, it's also created another frame and a lot of lines that are competing here for your attention in the image. So just be careful. Those strong lines can be distracting and not contribute to the overall composition. The other little thing, the headband is really sweet, but just try to get it up a bit higher so that it's not cutting through the top of that baby's forehead. But yeah, the baby looks relaxed. You've done a great job with the wrapping. It looks very neat. Just be careful with sort of little things like that, that sort of hit the edge of the frame that lead you down and grab your attention. Skin tones look good too, but yeah, just that light, it's a little intense. If it's natural light, try to diffuse it a little bit more, and if it's obviously strobe or a continuous light, Kelly, get it right. Just try to to feather that light a bit more so it is a bit softer. Alrighty, another blue one. I'm loving blue today. Look at those cheeks, my goodness. All right, so obviously the first thing you see when you look at this is that beautiful baby, but then the next thing I see is the wrap coming straight through the back of the image. It is darker. You've got a lot of smooth blue here and here at the top and the bottom, but then you've got a contrasty sort of line and pattern going straight through behind that baby, grabbing your attention there. So be careful with the placement of things like that. You can't see what the wrap is covering because you can only see the front of the baby. So if you were using wraps and things like that, try to, change your camera angle a little bit more so you can see what the wrap is being used for, I suppose, if that makes sense, as opposed to just kind of being a bit of fabric that's been left sitting there in the background. The bullseye composition, it looks good, but there is a lot of information here at the front of the file that doesn't necessarily contribute to the image. So, when I'm looking for, I suppose, placement of the baby within the frame, then make that baby a little bit more prominent and get rid of some of that information in the background, in the foreground that's not necessary. And then, you're still going to have that baby smack bang in the middle. All right, in terms of lighting here, again, the baby is being side lit. So this is a perfect example of split lighting, like soft split lighting. So it's coming in, from the side. The elbow is the brightest part of the image. The face here is lit, but then, this whole side of the baby, it's not getting enough fall off of light to create those beautiful shadows that are going to highlight those features. So bring that light further around, so it's on a 45-degree angle towards that baby's face, and you're going to get a much better result in terms of the way that it's going to highlight and shape the baby, because you don't need to light down here. You need to light this. So if, for example, let's bring our baby back around, if you are lighting the side of the baby, the light's going to come in and it's going to stop here. So, but get that light, up and around on a 45-degree angle, and then the light's going to fall, more evenly across the front of that subject. I always like to sort of line up the edge of my softbox as well, you know, with where the baby's positioned on the posing bag. So I'm not lighting the background, I'm lighting the foreground, which is where the baby is. Alrighty. But yeah, posing's done really well. Also be very, very careful with shooting with wide angle lenses. I'm not sure what lens this was shot with, but yeah, try to use a longer focal length when you are working with babies. Skin tones are lovely too. Alrighty. Look at that little smile. Bed props, you can have a lot of fun with them, and you know, we have how you position the baby and so forth. The one thing that is kind of standing out here is you've got this beautiful sort of you know, natural coloured background, and then you've got a white bed, you've got a little teddy bear and car that sort of match the tones that are in the background, that match the tones that are in the skin, and then you've got the little blue and white outfit and pillow that work really well with the bed, the white bed. So I'm not quite sure why the dark area here. So it is very dominant in the photograph. It's a large area of a very dark sort of material that doesn't sort of tie in with any other element in the frame. So possibly using a lighter tone would have worked really well here. Perhaps, you know, like even a lighter sort of tone like this could have worked and toned it all in really well, and it would have made the baby stand out more as opposed to the contrast between the dark and the light here. So another thing to kind of keep in mind when you are styling your setups. The other thing is, you know, when we're working with our backgrounds, just be careful in terms of how you paint them in. If you have a little look in here, we've got sort of, you know, like a little bit of a highlight coming down here around the edge of the baby, and then it sort of gets darker, so it's called like a little bit of a haloing effect there. And then down the back here, where it's sort of coming into the foreground, you've got a little bit of banding happening there too in terms of the shift of tone, where it goes from darker to lighter. The light, again, it is quite contrasty, it's quite bright and intense. It does look to be a little low, so you want to get that light a bit higher so it's coming down in this sense and falling across that baby. Because, you know, when we're sort of looking at the direction of these shadows and where they're sort of falling there, and how that light's kind of hitting then some of those brighter areas, it is a little distracting in that sense. So get that light a little bit higher and softer, so less intense, and you won't have such bright shadows. But you can see this arm is a lot brighter than the actual face itself, so you just got to work on repositioning that light so the face is the brightest part of, you know, the baby, and you're going to draw the viewer's eye into that face. Alrighty, I don't think there's anything else there. A couple of little things.
Quick question, what do you classify as a longer focal length?
So anything, you know, around the sort of 70 mil and above, really. I shoot with a 24 to 70, and my lens pretty much stays at 70 mil for the entire section, excuse me, get my word right, unless of course I'm shooting a prop and I've got to zoom out for that wider angle to fit everything in, so I'm not having to stand on anything above a baby. But yeah, I'm always going to look for that longer focal length because it's going to flatten features and it is more flattering to the subject. When you think about lenses, and jump onto YouTube and have a look at my free lens video, and it explains how they capture, obviously, you know, how they work, what they're better suited for and things like that. But when you think about a wide angle lens, it's going to take in a lot more information in terms of the frame. So you need to get a lot closer to your subject. When you have a longer focal length, you know, you don't have to get as close. You can still, with a 24 to 70, still get quite close at a 70 mil focal length. You don't have to, you know, move back a few meters, which I know a lot of people worry about. They love being able to stay nice and close, but when you shoot with a 35 mil lens, something like that, then you do run the risk of creating quite a bit of distortion. So you want to be careful of that. And I know it can be really tricky to kind of see it and identify it if you've got nothing to compare it to. So if you do have a longer focal length, practice. If you've got a child, take a picture of them with the different focal lengths and then have a look at them. But also when you're shooting with a wide angle lens and you're shooting, more than one person in a frame, you will make you will exaggerate the distance between your subjects, and you will make the person that is, or the element that is closest to the frame appear larger. So a few things to kind of consider there when it comes to choosing the right lens. But portrait lenses, have always been, preferred portrait lens has always been a longer focal length. And if you think about a 50mm lens, still beautiful, and I know a lot of people don't have the space in their studios to have a long focal length. That's fine. I worked in a really small space for many years with a 24-70, and I got away with it every single time. But if you think about a 50mm lens, it's considered to be very similar to how we see with our eye. So I want you, wherever you're sitting right now watching this, I want you to just stare straight ahead and then have a look at how far your peripheral vision goes and what you can see. So it's still quite wide, and in terms of focal length. Whilst there are many beautiful 50mm lenses out there, and I have one of my own, and you can take beautiful portraits with it, you just have to understand the glass inside the lens and how it captures it, which is why I did that lens video on YouTube. It's free, it goes for 50 minutes if you've got an hour and you want to learn a little bit more about lenses. Alrighty, let's keep going. Look at this gorgeous outfit. That beautiful jadey greeny lace is just absolutely gorgeous. And it's got a little grey kind of flower down here as well, I think. Yeah, so this is such a cute baby. Look at that face, those cheeks. Okay, so in terms of a close-up, you've got that beautiful face obviously there. The face is sort of pointing you into that negative space, which is great. The thing that's kind of standing out the most for me is the headband. If it was just a little higher on the top of the head, it would have framed the face as opposed to going through it. And what I mean by that is, we've got this beautiful face. So you want to frame the face and follow, from the top of the head and the shape of that face as opposed to cutting through it. And that's what I'm always talking about when it comes to headbands. You want to place them at the top and have them help frame the beautiful face, not sort of cut directly through it, if that makes sense. The other thing I'm looking at here is just the exposure. It looks a little underexposed. You can see, this baby has beautiful creamy skin, but if we have a look, and let's take it into curves again. If we have a look at where all that information is sitting, it's sitting down here into the darker sort of shadowy areas. You've got your highlights over here, and then you've got your shadows down here, and then you've got your 50% grey, your mid-tones in the middle here. So, skin that is this pink, it should be sitting up here. But if you have a look at where that little hand is sitting, it's in the middle. It's not. If you were to look at this baby's skin in real life with your own eye, it's not going to be 50% grey. It should be sitting higher up here in terms of exposure, where you should have captured that information at the time of the shoot. So yeah, if we have a look at the baby's face, it is quite sort of dark, and it needs to be a little brighter. So this is where, I'm gonna lift that exposure there. And if you can see before and after, and now brightening it, you're going to draw more attention in towards that area of the image. But yeah, get that exposure right in camera. You've got a lot of dark areas down here, and if we go back into our curves, and you can see with our guide, how much black information is in this photograph. And I'm guessing that this is not black, this fur, so it is quite heavy. Lifting that exposure is going to really help this image. I know when I'm talking about exposure in terms of getting it right in camera, that's the reason I created that, because I see a lot of photographs underexposed. I see a lot of people, you know, looking at the back of their camera going, okay, I've got it and I'll move on, or I'll fix that later. The thing is, there are some things you can't fix. If you've overexposed it, then there's no information there. You can't fix something that's not there to begin with. If you've underexposed it and you've got black, you know, you can't bring the detail back there. It's gone, and it's going to be very difficult to get it right. But if you were to print this image, you're going to have some black blobs on the page, and it's not going to print any detail in those areas. So always consider, you know, getting that histogram up on the back of the camera, and making sure that you get that exposure right in camera. The other thing is, you know, I see a lot of people advertising actions, Photoshop actions and Lightroom presets. And when they show you the before and after, the before photos are usually very underexposed. But the preset and the action is so amazing, it fixes it. You shouldn't have to fix photos, ever. You want to get that exposure right in camera. That's what perfecting your craft and being a photographer is all about. Because you know what? We've got cameras in our hands 24/7, and these are really good cameras. You need to be a point of difference. You need to be able to offer your clients that they can't, you know, something they can't do themselves. You know, you want to give them a reason. You are a necessity for them to hire you, because if you, you know, if you're taking photographs that they can take on their phones, there's no reason for them to pay you. So we want to get better at our craft. We want to improve our skills, practice, learn what it is to take the perfect exposure, understand what, you know, how beautiful photographs are made, and just, you know, I don't know. Oh, I could go on about that all day. Let's get back to these photos.
You're getting passionate.
It's Friday. Okay. Yeah, but other than that, you know, the baby looks really comfortable. I love that sweet little face, and I quite like that sort of offset composition, and with that little face sort of leading you into that negative space. But just be careful with negative space, you know, if it's underexposed or what have you. Yeah, just be careful. Alrighty. I do enjoy backlit maternity photos. Okay. So looking at this, the composition is beautiful. I think you've done a great job there with the camera angle, and you know, wow, what a flexible mum. I probably would have come a little further this way. So I can see, you know, obviously where you've shot it. Let me just make my brush a bit bigger. You know, obviously where you've shot it there, sort of smack bang on. I probably just would have moved a little further this way, and you could have still achieved the same result just by tilting your camera. Purely because then you will avoid more areas like this. It would have been just that little bit more flattering to not see, you know, so much of the armpit and not see so much of the shadows down here. So just moving a little bit more, you know, towards the top of the lady's head, and you would have, you know, got that. Even just when you are posing them and getting them set up, if you just push the bum, you know, put the bum a little further away from the camera and just bring the arm down, you know, so it's covering that armpit, it could have been more flattering as well. So just perfecting a few of those little things. The other thing is that where the sort of skin does come down in this area, I probably just would have liquefied that up just a little bit, and then sort of softened the contrast there between those highlights and shadows underneath her. And where that light's kind of falling across here, you know, you've kind of got a little bit of a hazy sort of effect coming across the top of the knee, which is create a little bit of a shift in tone. So you've got some really warm skin tones down here, and then as that sort of haze comes across from that light, it's got that cooler sort of tone coming through it. So try to be careful with that. This sort of area down here where the toes are sort of pointing, if we have a little look in here, her foot looks dirty. So when you are sort of, you know, posing and getting that lighting right, it just looks like it's a little bit underexposed and a little sort of dark there, so be careful with that. And the foot down here as well. Where do we go? So yeah, I would come in and tidy up all of this area, but when I'm talking about fixing armpits and things like that, see these sort of shadowy areas, and you can see where she probably hasn't shaved her armpits that day, just tidying that up a little bit more as well. Yeah, I probably too, I'm not quite sure how long her hair is, but you know, possibly even, because the legs kind of come out, I probably, you know, would have followed with the hair as well, just to add a little bit of detail in there. And with the underpants, they don't really go in terms of colour. So, you know, I think you've done a really great job, but sometimes when we are communicating with them what to wear and stuff, you've got a white top and then you've got a pair of knickers there that are barely there, that probably could have been matched a bit better. Maybe a pair of a white G-string or something like that could have actually really worked here, so that it looked like an actual outfit as opposed to two sort of different pieces that don't match. But yeah, other than that, I'm enjoying that composition. She's beautiful, beautiful pregnant lady. Oh my gosh. Look at that wrinkly face. Oh, that is one cute baby. I do love these smiles. You know what? And great job capturing that smile. I think, you know, the parents are going to absolutely just love that. The other thing, you know, when you are capturing things like this, I know that you can't always come in and adjust the fingers and get the same perfect smile again. So if you did get another shot of that and you've got a hand with a flat hand, very easy to do a little bit of a hand swap there to get that perfect. And yeah, the other thing I'm looking at, you know, the crop it looks great. Probably, I mean, there just seems to be a little bit too much information down in this area here in front of the baby, but I mean, it's not that, I mean, that's just me being picky. So don't listen, no, I'm kidding. The brightness of the baby's back just here and that nose, they're two really bright highlights that are grabbing my attention. If we take this into curves, we can see exactly where we are losing information there. So there's not a lot of detail in that area there of the baby. So and that's right up against the edge of that histogram. So be careful when you are, you know, capturing your images in camera, that you are getting that exposure right. I'm going to keep saying it, get it right in camera. Use that histogram. And when you are editing, be careful and keep an eye on your histogram at the top. You know, I've always got mine open so I can watch it, and I work in, you know, levels and curves and things like that, so I can keep an eye on that information, so I'm not, you know, pushing it outside of its area, the desired area, I suppose. And yeah, other than that, you know, the background is lovely and smooth. The posing itself is lovely. Those little wrinkles on the back, I'm sure the parents are going to love. Just a little bit more consistency in terms of skin tone, evening it out could help here. You know, you've got sort of like a few sort of red tones going on through the face here. A great trick when it comes to these highlights on the nose, because sometimes it is, you know, it is hard to control some of those little hot spots. But yeah, if you use the patch tool and you're editing your skin, if you just grab the patch tool and then obviously you take it to an area that's got similar texture down here on the cheek. And then if you go edit, fade patch selection, you can bring back that area so that you've still got a highlight, because it would be very unnatural to not have a highlight on the nose. So bring it back just so that it's not so bright, and that works really, really well. All right. That smile though. All right, our lucky last picture. This is a beautiful background, and it's the first thing I've noticed. I am seeing more of it than I am of the baby. I've got to look for the baby because there's a lot of fur all the way around the baby. And then I keep going back to the background because I want to keep looking at it. The baby look is beautiful, don't get me wrong, like let's, you know, zoom in. Baby is beautiful, but it is easier to see the baby there than it is, you know, in here when your eye just keeps going to that background. The other thing that I am noticing, and I'll come back to the baby in a second, with the background is just the repetition going on over here with these flowers. So, you know, we don't have any happening on this side, but it just looks like during the editing process that it's either been cloned or moved or what have you. So just be careful when you are editing your background to keep it nice and consistent. You know, one way to do it instead of trying to play with that information is you could copy this side and hang on. Select this side and you could flip it and bring that in and use some of that information on the other side. Obviously you're now mirroring it, but you can play and adjust and obviously do some stuff, and you could even use curves to tone that side down so it is a bit more consistent in terms of, you know, the direction of your light, to add some shadows in there. But do be careful with that repetition going on over there. It does grab your eye. The other thing when you're working with babies in round props like this, you kind of want, you know, to get that baby as centered as you possibly can. And I know it's not always easy. They often like to have a little bit of a wriggle and so forth, but just, you know, grabbing that baby. Let's get rid of that. And repositioning them into the center, you know, of your prop, and you can rotate and so forth. But be careful then again of, you could make them a little bigger, of any sort of repetition that you might create there as well with that fur. The other thing I'm kind of looking at here is the baby's feet, you know, appear to be a lot closer to the camera than the baby's face. So when you are creating the supports inside your baskets, your props, always remember to have the upper half of the baby slightly more elevated than the lower half. So that way the face is always going to be the closest part to the camera. And then it's going to be much easier to get them into position as well. So I like to create more of a well where their bottom is going to go, and then just have their little upper body slightly more elevated. So at the moment, if we have a look at our baby here, so at the moment, you know, if the camera was directly above her, it's sort of a bit like this, and you can see that the feet are higher. So whenever I position a baby inside a prop or that is like this, like a basket or a bowl, I get their bottom in first, and I have their upper body a little higher in the prop, so that the face then becomes closer to the actual camera, the lens itself. And then that way, you know, you're not going to have, if you're focusing on the face and it's further away, you're not going to have like an out of focus foot in front of that, you know, closer to the camera and making it appear larger. So just a couple of things to think about there. The overall styling of this is lovely. You know, all of those beautiful blue tones and the basket, I think it's absolutely beautiful. I just think that there is a lot going on here and the baby is getting a little lost. So a bit more refining in terms of, and you know what I would do? If I was to present this to my client, I would potentially make that baby look a little bigger, and I would lose some of the background. So it became more about the baby itself, and they became more dominant in the frame, larger in the frame, and then I would make them bigger here as well. So that way there's less background, it's still there, it's still beautiful, it's still contributing to the overall style of it. You just want to make it more about that baby.
Before you close that image, how did you rotate that is the question here. I'm guessing it's when you made the selection and you duplicated it? And then you did a little
so
rotate?
at the moment I'm I'm on my lasso tool, and I'm just selecting the baby and creating a copy layer of that. I haven't feathered it. You could feather it slightly to soften the edge. So let's do that. And then Command J, Command T, and then you just rotate, obviously with the mouse on those little anchor points there.
And that's the same thing that you did when you moved that background over. That's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other question that's there is about when you're in curves and you show the highlights or show the shadows, what's that button that you hold down to do that?
I'm holding in the Option key on a Mac. What is that? Is that the Alt key on a PC? Is that
sure.
correct? I'm not quite
sure.
Don't quote me on that. But on Mac, I'm holding in the Option key to move that slider to see where it is. But yeah, you can look at the histogram, obviously on the back of your camera. It's going to give you a good indication. And then have the histogram open when you are retouching as well, so you can keep an eye on that information as you are adjusting it. And yeah, but I just want to say, thank you to everyone that submitted a photo for today's critique. I know it's not easy putting your work out there. I did see a couple of comments yesterday with people being nervous and shy. And do you know what? I say don't put watermarks on them, no logos, and nobody knew whose photos they were that were submitted. So it is a way for you to receive critique that, if you don't want anyone to know if it's your photo. So I saw a couple of people comment about that yesterday. So don't be scared, put your work out there. The only way to learn and grow is to receive feedback. And I know sometimes, it can be very personal or what have you. Obviously, some people, might not agree with the type of feedback that they get, which is okay. Sometimes it's not until later on that you look and you go, now I get it. So, and you know what, I've got my own personal style and taste and preferences, and that will always impact, when I look at certain things. But at the end of the day, the key when you are photographing for your clients is listen to what it is that they want. Get as much input as you can from them about the different colors, styles, and setups, so that you are creating photographs that they're going to love. Make the baby the main part, the main element of every photo. So I often see pictures every day on the internet. I mean, when I go to Facebook, there's over 300 million photographs uploaded every single day on there. So I'm seeing a lot of images in a lot of different groups. And I'll often see a lot of attention and detail put towards all of the other elements in the photo, and then there's just a baby in there somewhere. So make the baby the main focus of every image. Make them look comfortable, content, and perfect them, and then start thinking about how you can add different elements to your photographs. But always get as much input as you can, like I said, from your clients, so that you are creating photos they're going to love. But yeah, that's pretty much what it's about. But I love doing the critiques. I do them every month right here in the group. You can go back and watch previous live critiques as well. So it is Friday. I'm going to be back Monday, and we're going to do something really fun, aren't we, on Monday for a live?
Are we going to keep it a secret?
No, let's tell them.
Okay, go on.
I'm actually going to paint a backdrop for you guys, a canvas backdrop. I'm going to, and I'll broadcast it live here. So I'm not quite sure what colour yet I'm going to do, but I'm going to have a look and see what I don't have.
Blue.
A lot of blue today.
Colour of the day.
But yeah, I'm going to show you guys how I paint my own canvas backdrops. I'm not going to do a big one. Oh, you can't see them, but I'm actually sitting below my big canvas backdrops that are normally between 3 meters wide and 5 meters long. I won't do one that big because I'll be here all day. But I'll do a smaller one that I can use for a prop. So I'll show you how I add texture and talk about the different canvases and things like that you can get. And I'll also show you how I can create some texture within those in those canvases as well. So it's going to be lots of fun. You'll get to see me make a mess. And yeah, come back and join me on Monday. I'm going to do that at about 10:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, right here in the group, and we'll have some fun. And then I think the next day I'm going to actually do some editing with some actions. So some of the actions that I have, I'm going to show you how I use those and how it speeds up my workflow to make me more productive when I am working in post-production in Photoshop. So yeah, we'll have some fun with that too. But Garrett's just kind of showing you there the canvas backdrops that I've got above me.
Just. Hold on. It's going to shake, but I'll show you. There we
There
go.
they are. So I've got a few different colours up there, and I have got some smaller ones rolled up elsewhere. So I'm going to paint one that'll go underneath my props, and we'll have some fun with that. So yeah, rightio guys, have an amazing weekend. Please look after yourselves, look after your family, and try not to put yourself in any vulnerable positions. We've seen a lot of posts and comments about people still doing photo shoots and things like that. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you to please stay safe and look after yourself and your loved ones, and try to make the best decisions for them as well. And I know it's going to be a tough time ahead for all of us. And I think if we just stay focused, we stay positive and look out for each other in the community right here in the group, we will get through this together. So yeah, have a great weekend with your family, spend some time. We've named our isolation a staycation. But yeah, Garrett and I have continued to come to work and just hang out here in the studio, and while everyone else is working from home, so that we can, do this and have some fun with you. But we're pretty much we're going home and coming here, aren't we?
Yeah,
we're not coming into contact with anyone else. So we are trying to look after each other here too. But I'll see you Monday for some fun. Stay safe. Bye.